Okay, everyone. So it is 12 p.m. and thank you all so much for being here with us over the lunch hour for the New York State Community Reuse Roundtable discussion. We're going to get started right now. I'm just going to do a brief intro and introduce our panelists, and then we're going to get started with some questions. All right, so this is a part of a grant that we're wrapping up. I work for the Syracuse University Center for Sustainable Community Solutions, and this is in part with the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute. And this is a grant that we've been working on, and we're finishing it up with this virtual event. So my name is Morgan Ingraham. I'm the program coordinator here at CSCS. And my email is right there if anyone has any questions after this and wants to, reach out, you can talk to me. Now I would like to introduce our panelists. We have 5 panelists with us today of reuse experts from different places in materials reuse. So I'll let everyone have about a minute to introduce themselves. So I'm going to just kind of call on people as we go. We have everyone's information here, their emails. I will have this available at the end. Anything. Oh, can you not hear me? Hold on.
I can hear you, Morgan.
Oh, you can. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, great. So I'm going to just stop sharing for a moment and I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. All right, so let's have Allison. Would you like to go?
Sure. I'm Allison Hague. I'm the Community Engagement Director for Bedford 2030, which is a grassroots organization, and we're devoted to combating climate change through high-impact actions. And one of those actions is our Take It or Leave It shed that you can see behind me. So the TIOLI shed is a vibrant, volunteer-run community gathering space, and we're trying to divert waste through reuse. This shed has been open since 2018. And it's open May through October, every Saturday from 10 to 12 in the Bedford Hills train station parking lot. So it allows anybody from the community to drop or take previously loved household items. And when the shed isn't open, we also have a TIOLI Facebook page that allows for larger furniture and items that we don't accept at the physical shed to be then upcycled for reuse. So it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, Allison. All right, Luna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Luna Oiwa. I am an embodied carbon consultant at Brightworks Sustainability, and I am based in New York City. I am also part of an informal group in New York City called Reclaim New York City, and it's a group that is made up of individuals who are interested in the reuse of building materials and proposing strategies for New York City to support the reuse of building materials. And we meet monthly in person. And in addition to that, I am on the board of the national nonprofit Build Reuse and the chair of the Data and Policy Committee. And beyond that, I've generally been in touch with a number of different networks across the country relating to reuse. Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Thanks so much, Luna. All right, Darren.
Hey, good afternoon, y'all. Darren Cotton, Executive Director with the Tool Library. I started the Tool Library as a grad student at the University of Buffalo back in 2011. So for the first 10 years of our existence, we were completely volunteer run. We have since added 2 part-time staff members, so we're super excited. We maintain a communally accessible inventory of about 4,500 tools, ranging anywhere from basic hand tools all the way up to pressure washers, lawn mowers, weed whackers, wheelbarrows, all sorts of things. And our goal is to remove cost as a barrier for folks trying to fix up their homes, grow their own food, or improve their communities. We do a number of different community initiatives, one of which is our Dare to Repair cafes. So these are volunteer-led pop-up events that we host around Western New York. And these are free to community members where they can bring in broken items and learn how to fix them for free. And really excited to see all the different organizations and models that are out there. So excited to learn as well as be on the panel.
Thanks so much, Darren. All right, and we have Suzie next.
Hi, I'm Suzie Fromer, and I am the coordinator for Repair Cafe Hudson Valley. I took over when John Wackman, he ended up passing away in 2021. He was our founder. And we have now over 53 cafes throughout the area. We sort of define our area as the Hudson Valley, the Catskills, and then we also have a lot in the Capital Region. We try to keep the borders there because it's a lot, but we're just so happy to support new cafes whenever they want to pop up, that even if you're outside of our area, we're happy to share some resources. Repair cafes are free. They're sort of pop up, they're scheduled, but they're not, we don't have a shop. Events that happen in towns, they're run by the towns. They started in Amsterdam, but there's just been a lot of enthusiasm in our area for them. And it's they do our new climate smart community points. So we get a lot of interest in starting new cafes.
Thank you so much, Suzie. And last but not least, we have Robin.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Elliott. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Finger Lakes Reuse in Ithaca, New York. We just celebrated 15 years of operation. We have 2 community reuse centers that are open 7 days a week, both in Ithaca and the adjacent neighborhood of Lansing, New York. I've been with the organization for the last 7 years out of those 15. And we, besides having a waste reduction mission, accepting used materials and making them available through our 2 storefronts, we do have additional programs around reuse, including a job training program for people with barriers to employment. We offer a weekly repair cafe model as well on Saturdays. It's volunteer run. They call themselves the Ithaca Fixers Collective. And we also offer a materials access program. So we work with over 30 service agencies in our county who work with clients in need, domestic violence, transitioning from homelessness to housed, reentry from experience with the justice system, various reasons. And we connect those clients with materials from our stores that they need, and we do delivery services to them for free as well.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much. All right. I'm going to share again, and we are going to get into our questions. So how this is going to work, it's going to be kind of like a roundtable discussion between our panelists. I'm going to be asking 3 main priority questions that each of them will answer. We'll give about 3 minutes per panelist to answer. And then at the very end, we will take Q&A from the audience. So once again, if you have any questions, please do stay muted during this time while we're answering these 3 questions. And then during the Q&A, we would prefer that you enter your Q&A in the chat. However, if you want to ask your question verbally, just keep it brief and we'll let you unmute at the very end during the Q&A. So please enter your questions in the Q&A if you think of anything during this time. Otherwise, we will have you unmute, like I said. All right, so let's get started. All right, so here are the topics of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about challenges and solutions. Second, we'll talk about funding opportunities for materials reuse, and then how to get started if you're a community in New York State and you just don't know where to start. All right, so question 1 is, what is one of the biggest challenges that you've faced or that you currently face in your reuse program, and how have you addressed it? So we're going to start kind of in the order that we just did. So I'll start with Allison. That question is, again, what is one of the biggest challenges that you faced or currently face in your reuse program, and how have you addressed it?
Sure.
And
so I think Because we are volunteer run, as it sounds like many of us are, the ongoing challenge is just finding volunteers to continuously staff the shed. We are quite popular. We have about 80 to 100 shoppers every week. It is a short time frame, and so within that time frame, they are taking in donations as well as putting things out on tables. And we do have a high volume of people that do not speak English, and so we also are challenged with helping those people to contribute in climate action in more ways than just the take it or leave it shed. So one really exciting new development this year that we've implemented is we hired a part-time volunteer coordinator who is bilingual. So she is there to help have those conversations that we couldn't really have previously, as well as develop an ongoing relationship with our volunteers. So it is really a nice little tight community that we have going.
Thanks so much, Allison. All right, and Luna, whenever you're ready.
Yes, happy to answer. I feel like I have a number of different initiatives going on, and I'm part of several different organizations. But in general, I would agree to Allison's answer that a lot of the, okay, I guess to backtrack, my job is in embodied carbon consulting as part of Brightworks sustainability, which is a topic that's very much related to reuse. But the work that I do in my job is not yet reuse. I'm trying to promote it within my company and try to get clients to incorporate it as part of their sustainability strategies. But a lot of the times, it's just difficult to make it happen for various reasons. And the reuse work that I do ends up being almost entirely volunteer work. And I'm finding that that's the same with a lot of the people around me. For example, Build Reuse, the national nonprofit that I'm part of, only has one part-time paid staff member, and everybody else is just working entirely in their free time. And because of that, things move relatively slowly. Right now, Build Reuse is trying to organize an in-person conference for February in Savannah. We have Green Build presence this week. So we have a booth at Green Build and are networking there. As part of Build Reuse, I have been developing a wiki, kind of an online platform where people can post resources about deconstruction, reuse, design for deconstruction, things like that. I'm also helping put together a statement of research needs where Build Reuse members can list out their topics that they're interested in research institutions looking into and prioritizing. And there's a separate definitions group that is trying to standardize key terms used in the reuse industry and get people across the nation to agree on these terms. And we have people trying to raise funding for all these initiatives, et cetera. But again, all this is volunteer labor. And I think the way that we're trying to address this is to reach out to people and organizations, big companies like Google, tech companies, and bigger entities, now that they have sustainability initiatives that take embodied carbon into consideration and are thinking about circularity, they are more willing to support. So there is that partnership with private entities that is beginning to form. And I guess the volunteer labor to a degree is something that's going to continue to happen. But for me personally, it's about making the time for that and balancing that with time spent trying to promote this internally within my company. Because it's ultimately not sustainable to try to do this entirely in volunteer time, but it's like balancing the two.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luna. And we'll be sharing the resource link for the Build Reuse Wiki at the very end of this. So stay tuned for that. It's a really great resource. Okay, Darren, if you're ready to answer this question, go ahead.
Sure. So at the tool library, as you can imagine, we get tons of donations of donated tools. And a lot of them tend to be sort of like the hand tools you see behind me, so more than we could ever possibly use. We just recently moved to a location that is about double the size we were initially in, and we are already finding ourselves running out of space. So one of the things that we are trying to do is we obviously don't want to turn away donations of tools that are in perfectly working condition. So how do we take that and use it to our advantage? So we will actually be hosting our first ever tool sale this coming fall, a way to hopefully generate some additional revenue for the organization, as well as sort of help cull some stuff from the inventory. And then also starting to build partnerships with other community organizations. Buffalo has a really vibrant immigrant and refugee community, so a lot of organizations that serve recently resettled families. So putting together basic toolkits, your most basic 10 or 15 hand tools, hammer, screwdrivers, those sorts of things, and giving those away for free to those families. So, you know, looking at the challenges and seeing what opportunities there are for, again, how can we, if it's not something that we can use, how can we still keep those tools in productive use while also still kind of fulfilling our mission and also hopefully helping other community organizations and other community members. So I will report back on how well our tool sale goes, but we're hoping that we raise enough to buy a couple bigger ticket items that we've had on our wish list for a while now.
Thank you, Darren. All right, Suzie, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I would say having a volunteer pool for our cafes is also our hardest issue, and it's a little bit more complicated because they're fixers. We need people who can come and fix. And while there's been so much interest and it grows, there's this pool of people who love to come and fix. And I see the same people often every weekend. I go I'm a jewelry repair person myself, so I do that sort of double duty with the coordinating. But there's just so many new cafes that they can't do them all, and that becomes an issue. And it's a complex issue because, I mean, obviously each cafe is locally run. I am just the person who it's almost like a franchise model, except it's not, because I'm not in charge at all. Everyone else is a volunteer in the entire organization through 53 cafes, and I'm the only person who's an employee of Sustainable Hudson Valley, a nonprofit. And so I'm just there to ease and help, but it's not, so there's just a lot of variety. But ultimately, you really should source, if you can, new fixers from your town. We are, one of the things I've tried to do, and it hasn't been the way we've done things in the past, and sometimes the organizers are a little protective of their fixers, but I'm trying to create a fixer list that can then go out to anybody. And there are some people who will go a long time. You know, I have someone actually from Jersey who's with the Garden State Repair Group who said, I'll come if I can, you know. So we have some really, really passionate people who will travel, but the way to do it is to really source people from your own town, because it just becomes this very wonderful community event when you're fixing something for your neighbor or it's being fixed by your neighbor. But then we face the challenge of building up confidence so that people say, well, I'm just a tinkerer. But yes, but if you can wire a lamp, that's more than I could do. I only do jewelry, and we'll also sort of train you. But I mean, lamp wiring, fixing a vacuum cleaner, those are things way beyond my scope. But a lot of people can do that. And they're like, well, of course. And that's the number 1 and 2 fixes asked for at our cafes. So there's just a complex system of getting people who aren't professional fixers to come and join our network, and also to convince professional fixers, if they want to just come, it's once, maybe every 3 months, maybe once a year, and it's not taking away from their business. And in fact, we allow people to advertise their own business, and we're trying to encourage and get people thinking about reuse and repair all the time. So we're more than happy to support local repair shops. And we often have a nice synergy where a bike shop will come and do a clinic and show people. But then, of course, more complex fixes need to go to the bike shop. So we really are trying to build that relationship with community businesses and communities. And but it's, you know, with every new cafe, it's the same, hey, I need fixers. And everyone comes to me, and I live in one place. I don't live, you know, so that I think is the complex, is trying to explain to the people running the program that they need to do it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of volunteer hours to run a cafe. And a lot of times we'll get a space that wants to host because they think it's going to help promote their business, whatever the space is. But we don't put on a cafe. I am the whole organization and I work part-time for 53 cafes. So, again, volunteers on that level too. It isn't just fixers. We also need dedicated people who are going to do all the preview work, which is a lot of promotion. It's a lot of hanging signs and then taking down the signs because we're an environmental group, and recycling the signs and Facebook postings and all those kinds of things on local places that I can't do from my house in Irvington. So those are definitely the human resources that we're trying to manage.
Thanks so much, Suzie. All right, Robin, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I'm relating very closely and empathetically to what everyone said so far, for sure. Because we're on the larger size of organizations, at least here today, we've got 73 employees and we have about 30 monthly volunteers that make up the bulk of our labor force. What I typically say about our challenges is that it's volume of materials being donated to us. I mentioned we've been growing, and we have been year over year. However, the amount of materials coming at us is outpacing that growth of our business, and we've been trying and struggling to try to keep up with it. But what I would say today is really that we have, at this point, a really clear picture of what we need to be able to address the amount of materials coming in. We don't know where the ceiling is. We're not sure where it might actually start to slow down or level off. That's really unknown, but we do recognize that if we had more staff labor, volunteer labor, and more physical space and a few additional pieces of equipment, we could really handle it in a more measured, safe, less stressful environment and really kind of keep up more with that demand. So the challenge I would say that we really have right now is in making our case clear and advocating for investment, not just in Finger Lakes reuse, but in reuse infrastructure in general. I think we are in a unique spot where when we're talking to elected officials or to other willing ears, there's understanding that what we're doing is unique and has a lot of great community investment. But what's a little tricky to kind of make the case for is that we are a unique business and that we are a 501c3, we're a nonprofit, we get grants, but we also have sales revenue, which is the majority of our revenue. So we're a mix of those two different types of businesses in a way. And that makes us a strange fit for some grant opportunities or for some, more traditional commercial loan or other opportunities through financial institutions. Similarly, on the elected officials front, we're starting to make headway even in our local government to explain what we really could do if we got a little additional investment to grow out of where we are today. But we have more work to do to explain really that I think what everyone knows now to our advantage is that there's too much waste, right? There's a lot of people who understand that piece of the case very clearly. And it's increasingly known that recycling markets are very low and are less effective than we thought they were when we first invested in them. So reuse to me is really clearly a solution that isn't invested in enough and that really could make an impact on the materials management system that exists today. So we'd love to see more of it, and we're starting to get more traction on those ideas. We certainly don't have all the answers, but we think we've got a good model project that could help others develop their own. So for me, that's the biggest challenge on our plate of figuring out how to make that case clearer and more compelling for other communities and institutions to invest in.
That's really great. All right. Thank you all for that first question. We're going to move on to our next one. Okay, so what funding opportunities are available for your type of reuse program, and how have you acquired them? And I know that these are all really big questions, so just as much as you can condense it in the time we have, you can mention just one quickly or just a couple you can reel off and let us know what you think. So we'll start with Allison again.
So in our specific example, Bedford 2030, my nonprofit, was the one to donate the funds to purchase the actual physical shed. So that was the biggest lift to set up the shed. Everything else inside the shelves, all of the decorations were donated, our tables, tents, all of that. So it really was just getting the physical shed up and running. We do have a very supportive town who donates the space in the parking lot. And then the ongoing upkeep is some liability insurance, which we also pay. But then if there were no nonprofit to do that funding, crowdsourcing, our community is really invested in the success of this project, because there are the people that are looking to donate and there are the people that are looking to take, and so there are people that are invested in different ways, and so that is one potential way to raise the funds to get this up and going. And we do have the Facebook as well, which is monitored by volunteers, and there's no real upkeep there, and we do have about 6,000 people in that group.
Great, thank you so much, Allison. And we're going to move on to Luna.
Yes. So builder use, I guess, generates revenue by having people pay membership fees. That's part of it, but we also had Google sponsor our last 2 conferences, and that was also a big chunk of money. So again, reaching out to private entities in our case was really important and helpful, and that was just done by forming that personal connection and letting them know what we were doing, communicating all the initiatives that are going on within the organization. And I think this is, again, a great moment in time to be doing this because there's so much going on regarding embodied carbon, circularity as a whole. There are deconstruction ordinances being put in place across the country. San Antonio passed one last year. Portland and Oregon has one. Palo Alto, several other places are coming up with them right now. The EPA has been involved in trying to figure out how to portion out the Inflation Reduction Act funding that's coming in from the federal government, and is planning to use part of that funding for reuse, although they haven't announced exactly how yet. In New York State, Executive Order 22 was put out last year, and that was kind of supporting the CLCPA and establishing a council to make sure that the state is thinking about these things. There are, it's like building material reuse innovation centers that are popping up across the US. And those are essentially hubs of reuse centers and reuse related businesses that are put next to each other, physically next to each other, so that they can support each other, each specializing in their own thing. And I've heard that Ulster County in New York is in the process of developing one right now. There are a lot of innovations in the building material reuse space that are happening right now. I've heard about deconstruction through panelization, so taking apart a building, not just component by component, but preserving parts of structures so that they can just be reused. For example, instead of taking down stairs into by their individual treads, just preserving the stairs and inserting that into another building. And that works in some cases better than others, but just thinking about these things and different ways to build. I've heard about Urban Machine, which is a company that's developing a denailing machine for reclaimed lumber. And Reaply, you might have heard of Reaply, but it's a really big company on the rise, developing an online marketplace for salvage materials, reused materials. I know people who are involved in researching structural steel reuse. I know somebody at MIT who's looking into this right now and helping develop guidance to make this a reality in the building industry. So there's a lot of amazing work happening on that, on all these different fronts in the building material reuse space right now. And Because of that, I think a lot of private companies are starting to pay attention to this, and sometimes you can just reach out and get funding from them. Again, I mentioned the EPA, IRA funding. On the wiki that I mentioned previously, I've been compiling a list of EPA grant opportunities that are related to reuse and keeping that as updated as possible. So these different grant opportunities are targeted towards different audiences, and not all of them might be applicable to you, but maybe take a look at that after this meeting. And I guess in general, want to say that reuse, especially building material reuse, is not just about lowering emissions or waste reduction. It can also be about pollution prevention and human health, job creation. And approaching grant writing from all these different angles can help make a case for building material reuse as well. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Luna. All right, moving on to Darren.
So when we started back in 2011, we got our initial startup funding from our city council member. Each council member is given a discretionary amount of community development block grant funding, and this is really flexible funding from the federal government. So they can sort of pick and choose projects. So we were able to get $15,000 in startup funds, and this really helped pay for the first year of rent, utilities, insurance, some tools. But that was kind of a one-time investment. So figuring out other sustainable sources of revenue. We are a membership-driven organization, so people join the tool library as a member. We have 3 tiers of membership: $30, $75, and $150 a year. And that's really depending on how people are able to support us at what level, and then also sort of how many tools someone would need out at any one time. So right now, membership is about 1/3 of our revenue every year. So again, as a nonprofit, it is always nice to have sort of that earned income as opposed to relying primarily on grants and donations. We are also really lucky that we do have some really great partnerships with local institutions, local municipalities. So for our Dare to Repair cafes, we work really closely with the City of Buffalo Department of Recycling. So they are able to provide some staff support there, as well as a small promotional budget, helping us with replacement parts, those sorts of things. And as our first ever part-time executive director, funding is really a huge part of what I have been focusing on over the past year. So yeah, to Luna's point, thinking about what narratives you can sort of tell about your work that might not necessarily be super clear to folks, like with reuse and repair, you know, the very pragmatic, practical approach, but also sort of again, things like workforce development and public health. And so really trying to think about what those stories are and finding funders that that those sorts of projects would really resonate with. And then, yeah, just thinking about other ways to sort of generate revenue. So we are starting, we'll be hosting our first ever tool sale in fall. So ways to generate revenue through just what you're doing as an organization. And then, yeah, I think one of the things we struggle with, I look to a lot of our peers, a lot of tool libraries abroad, and they have dedicated circular economy funds, either at the local, regional, or state level, where they get a lot of funding for capacity building and for staff. And so I think there is a lot of work around advocacy for groups like us to do to get policymakers to realize the importance of the work that we do and the connection to climate change and climate action. So there is dedicated funding that is not one-off, but that is sustainable and that can provide, you know, imagine if every organization on this call had like 2 full-time staff people, what that would mean and the difference that it would make. So yeah, I don't know, hopefully that was helpful.
It was very helpful. Thank you, Darren. All right. And Suzie, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex issue for us. So we have two levels of it, which is one, fundraising for my position, which is done by Sustainable Hudson Valley and the small nonprofit. We're not even a nonprofit. We're just a program of a nonprofit. They're sort of our fiscal sponsor is how we see that. So we actually at Repair Cafe don't really deal with money at all. The cafes themselves deal with having to also fundraise or provide funds to start a cafe. We don't have a startup fund for each cafe. And so I advise them, and different cafes have different models, because the one I started with before I even worked for the organization was my local. We have a little consortium of cafes throughout the river towns. It's Hastings through Terrytown. And there, the model was that the first cafe was, we collect donations at the cafes. So they were able to then give a little startup fund to the next one. So that was a nice little model. But a lot of times the cafes are brand new. They don't want that. They just have one in their town. Certainly down in Westchester, it's more populous, so it's a better way to do it. But up in Ulster County, for instance, it's much more country, and you can have one here and 20 minutes away, and they're totally separate. So, we really struggle with this. Sometimes we'll get, I know that Dutchess County actually has been really generous. Whatever it's called there, the recycling and trash has reached out and said, how can we support you? And so they ended up coming, and they answered some of the Dutchess County ones, and brought, I think they coordinated with Helpsy to have like a fabric donation bin. And they also said, look, if you tell us what you need, one, we can print flyers for you, right? So that's a cost. Now it's defrayed, but also maybe we can write a grant to put some money into that for you. So we've had some support. And we have like 10 counties. So for me, I can't coordinate it. It has to be the local people so they can reach out to them. Or we've also had a lot of very good advice from the organizers saying, go into every Home Depot in your area, ask them for a donation card, and give us a donation, and then we'll spend it at your store to stock up our parts. We're not asking for $50. We're asking for a gift card. But, and it's also, people typically pay for their own repair piece. We do not charge for repairs at all, but we will sometimes ask for a donation for like a lamp socket. Costs us $5.50. We round it up. We charge for $6. Some cafes don't even do that. They don't want to do that. Some cafes are supported by their towns. Some get a budget from their town. Some get them from the CACs, the committee. Sometimes maybe you can ask for some money back from the CSC because the cafe is part of earning points for your town to get money, but everyone is different, and it's really a struggle. So then it's left to the organizer to ask for donations on a super grassroots level, like, can you donate pizza or at least give us a coupon? Because we always feed our fixers. And can we bake baked goods for the people coming to the cafe? Because we always have coffee. It's a lot of work, and we don't have a great system, but we are very committed to providing this service for free to people. And often, it depends on the town, but often people give very generously. And so then there is a pool for the next cafe. And if there's enough, if a cafe has done very well, often they will then send back to the mothership to continue to help with fundraising for my position. So it's sort of this ongoing thing, but it varies widely in our network.
Thanks so much, Suzie. All right, and Robin, whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think key for us for fundraising has been incorporating as a 501c3. We were, just as Suzie is under fiscal sponsorship to start before we got our own charitable status. So that allowed us to apply for grants via Cornell Cooperative Extension. So that's a potential great partner in other New York State communities too, that might be able to do a fiscal sponsorship like that. And for us, some of the key early partners were some private foundations that operate in the Ithaca area. We have the benefit of having Cornell here, so that means there is some philanthropy here that is unique in this community for sure. But I would say even more important than that is our partnership with Tompkins County itself. And that is a little unique, even for reuse operations. What really sparked us opening our doors in the first place was that the county's solid waste plan, their 10-year plan, at the time, identified a really progressive need for reuse and investment in reuse as part of the 3 Rs to reduce waste. I know more plans, including at the state level, are including more language around that, which is great. So because that was in that plan, it sparked conversation and initial investment, including from the county itself. They were able to provide some funds to start up a reuse center in the community. So that made a really clear way for us to talk to local officials or to even landlords around, what do you think? Could we have a good deal to do this? The county really wants to see this happen. So that was a really helpful partnership that remains today. They remain pretty close partners. We constantly get people calling thinking that we're actually part of them, even though there's a recycling center down the road. No, we're our own thing, but that's because it's been such a great partnership. And the other thing for us is that, merchandise sales of used goods is the majority of our budget. So last year we did just about 2.5 million in merchandise sales from used materials. And consistently it's been, even during COVID, supporting about 70 to 75% of our costs. So the rest of it is fundraising. We still have to do quite a bit of that, especially as we get bigger. But the more we can grow that business side and get revenue through delivery fees and sales, the more we can support the other programs we want to do. So that's been a really key strategy for us to really figure out how we can be more efficient and good at selling those affordable materials back to the community.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. All right, we're going to move on to our last question. And this one is going to be, once again, these are all very broad, but we do want to leave enough time for Q&A at the end. So if our panelists don't mind just keeping it to about 2 minutes max, and, condense it as best you can. So this question is, how did you start your reuse program? And so think back to the very beginning, and what advice do you have for communities to start their own? And all of you have different programs. So I'm assuming that these questions are all going to kind of be very different as they have been. So go ahead, Allison, whenever you're ready.
So our reuse program stemmed from a climate action task force, as did Bedford 2020. In its inception, it was just a bunch of concerned citizens that said, we want to do something. How are we going to do this? And then specifically for Take It or Leave It, how are we going to tackle this problem of waste? So that group got together and then they really banged out all of the details of what this could look like and how we could implement it in our specific town. So that task force then found one very dedicated lead volunteer. And I think that really is the key, to have somebody that's spearheading the initiative that really takes the onus on of owning this project. And then so that means reaching out to volunteers, various stakeholders, to see how this will be sustainable in multiple meanings of that word. So how are we going to get it off the ground, but how are we also going to sustain it over time? So I think that's the main recommendation, is just thinking about who are you serving, how are you going to serve them best, and then thinking about longevity of the program.
Thanks so much, Allison. All right, Luna, you're next.
Okay, I might just talk about my personal journey getting into the reuse space. So I started out about 3 years ago not knowing anything about building material reuse. But I got interested in it actually because I went to Cornell and I heard about Finger Lakes Reuse and their deconstruction program, which I feel like has been on and off. But I thought that was a really interesting concept and wanted to look more into it, and started searching it online. And then I started sitting in on meetings with different networks like Crowd, which is based in Ithaca, the Build Reuse nonprofit that I talked about. There are a lot of different organizations and networks like this. So I also sat in on the Bay Area Deconstruction Working Group and All for Reuse, which is a network that is more focused on trying to promote reuse of building materials in commercial projects as opposed to residential projects. And then there's also the Northeast Recycling Council, which has fairly recently started a material reuse forum, not just focused on building materials, but with some content on building materials as well. So just getting involved in these different groups, talking to people one-on-one, I visited some reuse stores in the Bay Area, even though I'm based in New York City, just so I could learn more. I started a personal blog about reuse and wrote about some individuals that I met. And from around that time, I think Reclaim New York City started, which is the informal New York City group that meets monthly. And I feel like all this work that I do for these various groups and the people I talk to, all this information has helped me cross-reference knowledge, and I feel like all the projects that I work on benefit from all the other initiatives that I'm loosely part of. So that's really helped me in getting a better understanding of the industry and where it's at and what the gaps are. So all this to say, I would suggest just starting by learning from those that are already in this work and doing this work in other regions, and then gather a team locally if possible. It's very likely that people are very interested and will be willing to meet even if it's on volunteer time.
Thanks so much, Luna. All right, Darren.
So I started the tool library as a grad student and really just sort of came out of my lived experience. I was a urban planning major, but living off campus in a pretty rundown apartment, trying to fix things up, not having the right tools, and really being interested in community development. So tool library was a really interesting concept, something that I hadn't seen locally. And so really just exploring that idea. I was able to work with a classmate who helped me put a business plan together. And we, like a lot of other organizations, we also started under a fiscal sponsor. So we were able to find another nonprofit who had a similar mission. And for the first 6 years of existence, we operated under them. We're able to write grants through them. They provided the insurance. And then at a certain point, our budget sort of grew larger than theirs. So it made sense for us to incorporate as our own 501c3. But yeah, we literally started with a handful of volunteers. I have a really embarrassing photo that is literally 3 rakes hanging on a wall. And I always say, like, this is where the tool library started. So not being, afraid to start small and slowly build. It's taken us 12 years to bring on 2 part-time staff members. And I think it just goes to show that people are super passionate about the mission and they believe in what we can accomplish through the organization. And similarly with Dare to Repair, the city recycling department approached us and said, like, hey, what do you think? This sounds like a great idea. They were actually on another webinar about waste reduction. So we put the call out for volunteers. Got a really fantastic response and organized our first one in 2017. And we have organized just over, I think, 36 to date. So again, yeah, I think it's really just having the idea, having the passion, and finding your folks who want to do the same thing. And reaching out to people who have done it before. And I have already learned so much today. I've written down a few notes for myself. So yeah, I really appreciate this as sort of an avenue to share with other people doing the same thing.
Thanks, Darren. All right, Suzie.
So I am in a unique position here amongst the panelists because I was not here when everything started, but I inherited a tremendous number of resources. I would say the first place to go if you're going to start a repair cafe is the international website, repaircafe.org. The only fee that you pay is to them. It's, I believe, 49 euros, which I don't know exactly what the rate is now, but that's what it is. And you get a kit of documents and yes, thank you. Logos and all that to use for that. And they list you on their international site, which is the best way to find a cafe that's not in our region, is to go there, because there was at one point a US site, but it isn't, so that's the place that most cafes are listed. But you have to understand there's a difference between an official repair cafe and all these other clinics. So there are still other places that you can find and do, but that's where, like I said, we're sort of this franchise model. So when I'm talking about repair cafe, that's where it's listed. And then Number two would be John Wackman, who was, again, the founder, and Elizabeth Knight, who's one of our organizers who now moved to Jersey and is organizing there, wrote a book together called Repair Revolution. And chapter 7 in that book is, how do I get one of these in my town? And so I have created a document that I use internally based on that chapter. It's kind of like clip notes just to get people started. And that it just has tremendous amount of information on ways to, where to find fixers, what kind of venue, so very, very, very helpful. And then we actually did a Zoom last week with many organizers from other parts of the country on how to start a repair cafe. And we just posted that on our website, which is repaircafehb.org. And we also have a YouTube channel. It's there. So, I mean, we really just live to do this. We need to help other people spread it. So, I mean, there's a lot of resources to do it. There's also Don Fick is from Repair Cafe North Carolina, and he was on our Zoom, and along with, I think it's Zero Waste Washington, they're doing a little conference in December, which is about reuse and repair mostly. But they also have a third Thursday Zoom that any organizer is welcome to drop in on. So, I mean, there's just a lot of communication. There's also a social media site called Hilo that we're trying to put together a little repair organizer chat on. So, anyone's welcome to reach out to me and I can forward those links, but we really have worked very hard to consolidate the information to make it easy for you to start your own.
Thanks, Suzie. And I posted some of those links in the chat. But again, yes, your contact emails are all in the chat. So please do feel free to reach out to any of our panelists about anything they're talking about if you have follow-up questions after this. And next we've got Robin.
Yeah, first, just shout out to Suzie. The website is really nice. My parents recently relocated to Beacon. I can see that your cafe there is dormant, so I'm going to send them that link and prod them to check it out. Yeah, as far as in Ithaca, how we started our reuse program, I mentioned in my last response about partnering with the county and our Cornell Cooperative Extension. The advice I would have is definitely lean towards being collaborative as much as possible. As we've heard from some of the other speakers, talking to other people, see what things are already happening in your community that you could build off of. Use those strengths to your advantage. And in terms of finding funding opportunities and even volunteer support, that's all about the connections you make too. We've had great success with with learning about foundation opportunities or even government grant opportunities by talking to people who are interested in anything related to waste reduction or repair. And I do want to shout out as another possible funding source for people on this call, the DEC. They have great programs. Some of them our county has been able to tap into since they're municipal grants, but to support more outreach efforts around reuse. So there's been a connection there. They also have an environmental justice community impact grant program that has supported us for several years, and they have maps on their websites. So you can see if you are in an environmental justice community based on their map. And if you are, it means that you might have access to those funds. So that's been hugely supportive for us. And other advice I would say is just that it's apparent to us, and I think to the other programs here, that reuse and repair are labor-intensive processes. They require people, they require skills sharing, and the more you want to do, the more people you need to manage it. So while that is a challenge, it's also an opportunity. We started our job training program because we recognized we had a need for more people to help us. And we were talking to other community agencies and programs that recognized we're trying to find good work sites for people with barriers to employment. So that connection has not only kind of shaped our organizational culture of who works here and why, it has also opened other opportunities for us to seek out different grants and different partners that we wouldn't have otherwise. So the fact that we need a lot of people to do it is actually enticing to a lot of people who are interested in workforce development or looking for good jobs for people who need them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robin. All right. So we have about 7 minutes before we're going to end. We're going to leave that time for Q&A. But just in the interest of time, before we get to Q&A, I just wanted to thank our reuse panelists so much for giving us their time. And, thank you once again to everyone who's joined today. We are still going to do a Q&A. I'm going to put this slide up at the very end, but I did want to let you all know that there are some reuse resources to check out, that a few of them have been mentioned. So the Build Reuse Wiki, which Luna was talking about, is a really valuable resource. We here at CSCS are developing a reuse locator map tool that's always evolving. So feel free to check that out at recycleright.ny.org. NYSAR 3 has a community reuse grant coming up. And the deadline, I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's coming up soon. So go to the nysar3.org website. You can also just Google search community reuse grant NYSAR 3. It should come up. And please do apply for that. It's a really great funding resource for New York State communities. Last but not least, reuse resources are available that I developed as a part of the P2I grant that I mentioned at the beginning of this. They are available on the recyclerightny.org website under reuse resources. And those are, there's some case studies involving some of our panelists today and other model reuse programs and lists of resources that you can all access, and they're free to share and distribute. Okay, so back to our Q&A. We do have one in the chat, so I'm going to do that one first. We have, oh, thank you for Lisa. Yeah, the NYSAR community grant deadline is the 30th. Okay, so Judith Wolf asked, do these programs include clothing and shoes that may need repair but are not in perfect condition, such as having holes, etc.? So I'll kind of let whoever wants to answer this go first, and just go ahead and unmute if any of our panelists want to answer this question.
I'd love to build on what Robin said earlier, because we also have partnered with the Community Center of Northern Westchester, who has a training program for underemployed individuals, and that often means textile upcycling. So we had the ladies that are in that program come, and we did a repair cafe at the Take or Leave It shed, and all of their sewing machines were powered by electric vehicles. So that was kind of a cool bridging of all of those worlds together. We've also hosted visible mending repair cafes, where we're flipping it on. Instead of hiding imperfections, it's more of a wabi-sabi, like, if it's not perfect, that's okay. So while we are not primarily focused on textiles and clothing, I think there are directions that we can all take to reduce textile waste.
Yeah, that's great. We do accept and get a lot of volume of clothing and shoes at our donation spots in Ithaca. And it is an area that we've been pondering over for a while, because a lot of it is actually perfectly great and not in need of repair. We just can't keep up with how much there is. So we end up storing it for a long time before we get to it. But things that do need repair, we've tried a few creative outlets with events with the community. So we've had people come in to demonstrate how you can turn a t-shirt into a reusable tote bag, or we have a quilt making group that meets at least weekly in our community space, and they're able to upcycle some of those fabrics or cut out pieces that are still usable to then incorporate into their projects. So that's a really great engagement tool. It definitely doesn't address the volume of materials. So the next step for us that we really want to do is get a baler for textiles that are no longer reusable in their current form, but could be recycled or used into different forms of shoddy or fabric that could be used for rags, etc. So once we have that baler, based on the volume we're getting, we'll be able to use it to then send to in-state recyclers in New York. But right now, in our community at least, there's not a recycling outfit that can accept what we have. So we're in an in-between spot. I would love to see more repair and creative crafts come out of the textiles that are there that are just a little stained or torn up or missing a button, because those are really great events, and there's a lot of stuff out there that could be used for something else.
And I'll just add, our model is that we're fixing things for people. So people bring it in whatever shape it's in, and they're usually just so happy to get it back. I mean, as a jewelry fixer, like people are so, oh, that's okay. That bead's okay. You can put that in, they're just so happy to wear it again, or, so, but one of the struggles we have is once in a while, someone wants to donate something, not textiles, but like a TV that doesn't work. Then we'll bring it to you and you fix it and you keep it. And we don't have a storage. We are pop-ups. So we always have to say no to those things, which is hard, but we will fix anything for the client, for the customer, the guest, in whatever shape it's in.
Okay, we are almost at time. We have so many great questions, so I apologize that we're not going to be able to get to all of them. But really quick, the next question that was asked is by Ermin here in the Q&A. Are there any reuse vendors for furniture or other durable goods in the New York State contract system for municipalities, schools, etc.? So reuse vendors is the question. And if we want to do a quick lightning round, we are at 1 p.m. So if people need to go, that's absolutely fine. But if anyone wants to stay on for just a moment to answer this question, we can close after this.
I'm not aware of which places might be registered vendors, but I do know a few programs that focus on furniture specifically. So I know that Capabilities is an organization in the Southern Tier that is working with people with disabilities, and they do upholstery and refurbishment of furniture and then sell that out. So they work with used furniture, accepting it and then selling it. And there are a couple for-profit businesses, certainly, that I'm forgetting the name of one that there is one at least that operates in Rochester. I'm sorry, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but they work with, getting buyouts of particularly office furniture when a business is shutting down or moving location, and then they warehouse it and then sell it to buyers that contact them directly. So there's some good for-profit work happening there of just connecting people to overflow or used furniture.
Thank you so much, Robin. And I noticed, Suzie and Darren, you answered Jesse Kern's question in the chat, so thank you so much for that. We are out of time, but if any of you want to do any of these follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to our panelists, and their emails are earlier in the chat. So you can always reach out to me as well for their contact information if you need. And I just want to thank our panelists once again for giving us their time and their expertise and their advice. And thank you all again for attending today. Once again, feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any other questions. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.